I'm Victoria Fabbo. I'm a registered dietitian here in the local community. A little bit of background about myself. I have my associates in baking and pastry from Johnson & Wales. I have my bachelor's in culinary nutrition from Johnson & Wales University. And then later on, I went and got my master's in public health at University of Massachusetts Lowell campus, and I minored in dietetics. So I'm a registered dietitian, and I'm here today to talk about Thanksgiving meals. I know for Thanksgiving, everybody feels that stuffed full feeling. So today we're gonna think about 2 butternut squash recipes. First, we're gonna be doing butternut squash soup, and then second, we're gonna be doing butternut squash lasagna. And of course, we have to end it on a sweet note, so we'll work on apple crisp. All right, guys, we're gonna get started on our butternut squash soup. So first, we're gonna cut up our onion and our garlic. So just so you can see, we're gonna use about 3 cloves of garlic. I'm also have a running compost going, so if anybody has a separate bowl they can put off to the side, and any of their waste can go in there. I like to have a little compost going because since we're making soup, we need a vegetable stock. So any of our trimmings from our garlic or onion or vegetables, I usually save those in the freezer, and then I use them in vegetable stock when I need to later. Especially with the winter months coming, we're going to be needing any of our antioxidants from garlic in our food, so that's a benefit. When I'm cutting an onion or a vegetable, it's important to do a bear claw to keep your hands safe. Sometimes I might spread it out, but make sure if you spread out your fingertips that they're flush against the knife so that we don't miss any fingers, okay? So, and if you feel like you're about to cry with an onion, it might happen, so it's okay. All right, so first I'm gonna cut the onion horizontally. And then I'm gonna go ahead and cut down vertically. And then to make them as minced or as chopped as we can, I'm gonna cut them once more. Okay, so I'm gonna skip a little bit ahead. We're also making a butternut squash lasagna. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop the lasagna in and let that cook while we're waiting for our butternut squash soup. Go ahead. I already seasoned the water with some salt. And why do you think people add salt to water? Yes, in theory for it to be seasoned as well, but also there's a chemical property that's happening, right? The water, salt is being added to water, and those hydrogen bonds are being broken, and that's where water is starting. So we're gonna go ahead and give that a timer of 8 minutes, 8 to 10, until it's ready. All right, sounds like our butter is ready to go. Again, be careful with the lids. So the goal here with our butter and our onion and garlic is we want to make it as translucent as we can. So go ahead and throw those in. And give it a nice toss. All right. And then I want to make it as flush against the bottom of the pot as we can. Another thing to think about as well is we are going to be sweating these onions and garlic. Sweating means you have a low heat in a pot or a pan with an oil, and then you put a cover on with the root vegetables in there or any vegetables you may have in there. Put the lid on, and low and slow, we give that a take. It takes about 8 minutes or so, and for them to be fully translucent. All right, so I'm just gonna give this pasta another mix, and then we'll head on over and cut our butternut squash. All right, so next we're gonna work on our butternut squash for our soup. You also use this butternut squash technique for our butternut squash lasagna. All right, if you'd like to, you do not have to peel the butternut squash for the lasagna, but for our soup, we're gonna peel it. So stick it on the flat end and bring the peeler straight to the top and work your way all the way down. And sometimes the funky shapes of butternut squash can make it difficult, so don't mind it. Again, add your scraps to the scrap bowl. We want to cut it in half. You can do the long way or the short way, whichever way is easier. There are seeds in the middle, and we are going to want to scoop those out. So with a firm grip, you want to make sure you cut down on the knife. The squash can be slippery at times, so you just want to make sure you're as safe as possible. And why butternut squash? It is harvest this time of year, which is great. I'm going to cut it face down so it's more sturdy on the board. Any way you cube it is fine. So go ahead and firmly place your hands down. There's my timer for the pasta. One way to tell if pasta is cooked is it will also be translucent. That's how you know it will be completely done. So this looks about done. I'm going to turn off the stove and drain this. Let's go ahead and finish up our butternut squash to add to our soup. And the nice thing about squash, it is orange, right? So orange vegetables have beta carotene in it. Beta carotene is great for our eyes, so it's some great micronutrients that we need. In our butternut squash lasagna, we're going to be cutting 2 zucchinis, 2 peppers, and onions. And that's going to be our fillers on the lasagna. So I cut off the edges, again being mindful of where your fingers are. Things seem to be just popping off the board on me. All right, so feel free to cut the zucchini any way you like. Sometimes I like to cut the zucchini in half, sometimes in thirds, just depending on how long the zucchini is and for it to be easily manageable with my hands. Okay. And then feel free to put it on its side, on the top. I'm gonna leave it like this today and cut it on the middle. And then I'm gonna cut thin slices with it. You may transfer the vegetables onto a sheet tray as they're gonna be roasted in the oven. Now we have our peppers. Peppers have seeds and they run away, so just be careful that they're not going everywhere. All right, let's go check our onion and garlic to see how they're doing. The longer you can cook the onions and garlic, I feel the more the aromas and flavors come out. So if you can do low and slow, take your time doing so. All right, we're gonna add our butternut squash. And we're gonna let that slowly cook until they're nice and soft. If you're like me, at times you might get the winter blues, and we need our vitamin D to keep us nice and happy during the winter. We're gonna cut up our mushrooms. Mushrooms are a great source of vitamin D. And last but not least, our onion. So I cut the 2 ends off and then I cut down in the middle. I cut down in the middle so it's easier for me to grab the skin and to peel it back. Cut down the middle again, horizontally across. And this, you might want to keep it long like the layers we've been leaving. So I'm going to cut the julienne. Okay, add those. Now we're going to add our seasoning. We have garlic powder, basil, and salt, and pepper. Sprinkle that on over. Then add some olive oil. And give that a nice toss. You want to make sure it's all incorporated together nicely. Okay, I'm going to add in more vegetable stock into our squash soup. You want to do your best to make sure the squash is all covered so it all cooked evenly. Go ahead and raise the temperature to about low medium. And we were talking about our food scraps earlier, right? So this is what I've accumulated since cutting for both the butternut squash soup and the lasagna. How you make your own vegetable stock. You get boiling water, you add in your scraps, you let that cook for about 30 minutes. Then you strain out the scraps, and then you have your own vegetable stock. Vegetable stock at the supermarket can have more sodium in it. Therefore, making it at home can reduce the sodium in your product. Yes, you still want it flavorful, so for that sense, you will add more spices and herbs to make it more robust and flavorful. On that note, let's go ahead and grab our herbs to put in our soup. I actually had rosemary left over from the summertime, and I had it in the freezer. I also like to freeze some of my herbs, so then I have them handy when I'm in use. So this is leftover frozen rosemary, dehydrated sage, and garlic powder. So go ahead and add that to our stock. Give it a swirl. I love the smell of rosemary and sage. It smells great. All right, so we're gonna continue with that on medium to high heat, and we're gonna let that cook for about 40 minutes. Now that our vegetables are chopped and cut, we're gonna put them in the oven. You wanna put them in the oven about 400 degrees for about 40 minutes. So we have our mushroom, our zucchini, peppers, and onions. So we can go ahead and assemble the lasagna. I went ahead and I cut up our butternut squash. I added brown sugar, salt and pepper, cinnamon and nutmeg. You can add allspice in there as well. Give that a nice toss with some olive oil. Put that in the oven for 400 degrees for about 40 minutes to an hour until it's nice and soft. All right, so now that we have this mixture here, we're gonna blend it in the blender so it's nice and smooth to add to our lasagna. Okay, let's add it to the blender. If you have a food processor at home or a RoboCoupe, you can add it to that as well. Put the lid on. It is a little chunky still, not as spreadable, so if you'd like, you can add a little bit of milk or water to it to thin it out a bit. Great. So it looks about like this, and we'll spread that on for our lasagna. As any lasagna may want to have some ricotta. So we're gonna have our ricotta mixture with salt and pepper. I'm also gonna add 1 egg yolk, or 1 egg. There's also egg white there. All right, mix that together. All right. So now as it comes together, it looks much more like the mixture we want. So we have our pan. We have our butternut squash and our lasagna. We have our roasted vegetables completed. We have our cheese selections. So let's get started with the assembling. My mom is very particular with lasagna, so I hope I make her proud. So first we're gonna take butternut squash and we're gonna place it on the pan. Just to give the pan a base coat and the pasta somewhere to land. Not each corner has to be filled, but as long as it's there. So our lasagna is there. Now we're gonna add our ricotta mixture. All right. Again, move the pan as you need to. Let's add our roasted vegetable. And this can be a fun way for you to sneak in vegetables in, kids. If you want, you could also puree this so that nobody knows what vegetables are there. But if you would like to showcase the vegetables, you can do that as well. Now we're gonna add our cheese. I won't forget the first time I had lasagna in Italy. I was in Florence with my family right after I graduated undergrad. And there was lasagna and rabbit on the menu. And I said, well, I need to have both. If there's ever rabbit on the menu, I'm ordering it. So I also wanted lasagna because I'm in Florence. So my sisters were like, Victoria, you can't have two entrees. I was like, yes, we're in Italy, we're doing this. So I ordered the lasagna and rabbit, the best choice I could have made. I've never seen lasagna, and this is Parmesan cheese and mozzarella cheese, but I've never seen a lasagna with such little cheese on it, but yet so flavorful. The pasta was so thin, and with the sauce on it, it was just wonderful. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and add our butternut squash onto it next. And this might be where it gets a little bit dicey if things are coming up with the butternut squash when spreading it. So don't worry, you're not alone. Add a little bit more on the sides, it looks like I need to do. Let's add our next layer of pasta. I think of every holiday how we always make lasagna in my family, and I think adding this way with extra vegetables is great for our fiber intake, and that also correlates with having good bowel movements. So as a registered dietitian, I'm constantly monitoring those for my patients and residents and clients. So just to be mindful, a healthier and healthier life is making sure you get enough fiber in your diet. And we always want at least 3 servings of vegetable in our diet a day. Okay, so our lasagna is there. I'm gonna add our ricotta mixture. I can't wait to enjoy this with my family. Want to make sure we can get all of the ricotta in there. Spread it nice and thin. Okay, looks good. Go ahead and add our remaining vegetables. Spread that out. Right, she's looking pretty. Push this off to the side. We'll clean it later for sure. All right, let's add our cheeses. Mozzarella shredded. And cheese too is another protein source that we are adding. And cheese also has vitamin D and calcium, which support bone growth. Add some Parmesan. And if you do forget the cheese, believe me, I've done it before. So don't worry if you miss a step when you're making the lasagna. Make up for it on the next layer if you want. Now with all the smells are coming together, it reminds me of Thanksgiving. I'm looking forward to it. Add in our last lasagna layer. All right, add in our last bit of butternut squash. And really do your best to scrape it clean. Less food waste and less cleaning. Looks good. And now we're gonna top it off with some cheese. Okay. Now, any baked dishes I do, baked pastas, baked lasagnas, I like to cover it first in saran wrap. And we want to make sure it's as tight as you can around the pan. And you want to make sure the saran wrap is tucked in underneath. Okay, so that's covered with saran wrap. Then we add our foil. Tuck that in nice and tight. Okay, so it's nice and wrapped. So why do we put the saran wrap on it first? I find that that keeps the steam in so that everything's able to cook nice and evenly. Then of course you can't put it in with just saran wrap because that will melt the plastic. So you add foil on top, which will keep it in, locked and safe. And we're gonna put that in the oven at 350 degrees for about an hour. I like, at my house, we like to cook the lasagna the day before for the hour, and then the day of you reheat it, and it feels like all the flavors really get together and really taste more awesome in your mouth. So if you have that time, use it wisely. Cook it the day ahead, and then that day just reheat it, and it'll taste great. So go ahead and put that in the oven at 350. So here's our lasagna that we've made. Feel free, if you'd like to use lasagna instead of boiling it, you can use oven-ready lasagna sheets if that's more accessible for you. We can cut and serve and enjoy it with our family. Okay, remember, it's not a meat sauce, it's butternut squash. All right, let's go ahead and check on our butternut squash soup, and then after that, we'll get started with our dessert. So I feel it is roiling and boiling over here. Yes, it is. Again, be mindful of the steam. I'm gonna turn that steam down, and I'm gonna take off the lid. So the squash is nice and tender now. I think we can go ahead and blend the squash soup, and it'll be ready to serve. Okay, so as you can see, I have the blender still a little bit more of butternut squash in from the lasagna. That's okay since we're using butternut squash twice, but otherwise give it a rinse. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the butternut squash off the stove. So if you do want it to sit for a couple of minutes and then add it, you can do that as well. If you don't have a blender accessible, go ahead, you can use a ladle and just squish the squash a bit if you want, and it will still taste great. If you want a thinner consistency, then go ahead and put it in the blender. So I'm gonna ladle that into the blender now. Just be mindful of the steam. Let's give this a whirl. Okay, so our soup is done in the blender. Just gonna go ahead and pour it in. That color is beautiful. Here's our butternut squash soup, our butternut squash lasagna, and you can go ahead and enjoy Thanksgiving, ensuring that you're getting your vegetables in that you'd like. You are getting protein from your cheese, and you are getting carbohydrates from the pasta itself. You can also do whole wheat pasta if you like. If you'd like a whole grain, add it to your diet as well. But enjoy it, it's Thanksgiving. So always remember, a soup size is about 8 ounces. This is a bit more. This would be more of a dinner size, and our lasagna here. Okay, now it's our Thanksgiving dessert. We're doing apple crisp today. I already cut up a little bit of apples with brown sugar, cinnamon, and nutmeg and lemon juice here. Let's go ahead and just give an example of one apple sliced. So I'm going ahead and I cut it in 4s. Again, save the cork. I like to make teas, so if I'm not feeling too well, I'll put the apple cork in a pot of hot water and I let that boil for a bit and I sip on some nice apple tea. And you can, of course, you can add apple and cinnamon to it as well. And you can freeze the leftovers in the freezer as well. All right, just gonna go ahead and give that a nice slice. Give it a nice gentle toss. break up any of the apple slices that may have stick together. So lemon juice is added so that the apples don't turn in their color. So you can not only add apple juice, you can add vinegar if you want it that flavor, which hopefully in the sweet dessert you might not want to, or you can add in some orange juice. In this bowl here, I have flour, oats, and brown sugar. I'm going to cut up some of the butter, and we're gonna give it a gentle toss. Also, when baking and or cooking, try to use unsalted butter. Again, for cardiovascular diseases to prevent, we want to make sure we limit the amount of sodium we're intaking. Go ahead and cut that 3 ways down the middle, 2 ways down the middle, whichever way you're feeling. We do want the crumble on top of the apple crisp to be about pea size, so if that helps. And if you want to cut it again another way down the middle, and then cut it this way, and so it's into cubes. Okay, transfer that into the bowl. Give this a nice gentle toss. Again, we want these butter cuts to be pea size. I won't forget when I was at Johnson & Wales, it was actually the baking bread class that we were taking, and we had to make biscuits, and that's where I really learned how to make a pea size. And if you don't make something a pea size, and if say you're making something with biscuits, then the butter, as it melts, it actually spreads the product more, and it might not be the desired look you're looking for, so it's something to consider. We want to make this as cohesive as we can. So what I like to do is, with the butter chunks in my hand, I like to smush them with my top hand. This reminds me of like a cute little nonna every time I make biscuits or something with my hand. I have quite a few aunts from Italy, and just seeing them make something with their hands is so incredible, and it tastes so well. So, of course, when anything's homemade, you know it's going to be made with love, and it's going to taste great. Okay, this is looking better. Right, so we have our pan here. We're going to add our apple slices. Spread that out. And then go ahead and get your crumble and crumble it on. All right, let's wrap this up. Nice and tight. We'll pop this in the oven, 350, about 40 minutes or so, and then you can enjoy it. Okay, let's dish up our apple crisp. Okay, here's our apple crisp to enjoy with your Thanksgiving meal. It's nice, quick, and easy, and it's great when you have a couple extra hands. Always be mindful when you're eating desserts this Thanksgiving season for portion size, ensuring that it's the right size for you, and maybe start small and then continue to add more if you'd like more. And if you're like me, I always enjoy some apple crisp with some vanilla ice cream. If not, feel free to enjoy it as it is. Thanks again, Cooking with Revere, for having me, Victoria Fabbo, here. Again, I hope you enjoy our Thanksgiving meal we prepared. We have our butternut squash soup, we have our butternut squash lasagna, and we have our apple crisp, of course, to end on a sweet note. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I hope you enjoy the time with your family this year. Thanks for having me.